Basil Rides Again, written and told by Kiefer Adams. The island of Sodor had not been lucky in recent days. The Fat Controller had ordered a new supply of coal, but unfortunately it was not working well for the steam engines. Whenever they puffed along, nasty black smoke billowed from their funnels. The coal also gave them awful indigestion, and the ash that remained clogged up their fireboxes. "Filthy rubbish," Donald grumbled to Douglas while they tried to double-head a goods train. The Fat Controller knew that something had to be done until a new order of good clean coal could be brought from the mainland. Luckily though, he knew exactly who to turn to. One morning, Toby and Terence were helping to clear a fallen tree. Terence had just pulled it off the line when a loud horn sounded in the distance. "I recognise that horn," said Toby. "I don't," said Terence. "What's going on?" Before long, a tender engine glided into view. But it wasn't any ordinary tender engine. It was Basil, the diesel-powered tender engine. "Hello, Toby," called Basil. "Long time no see." "But Basil," spluttered Toby, "what a surprise! What are you doing here?" "The Fat Controller says you've had a bad case of coal lately," said Basil. "I've come to help." "Well, we greatly appreciate it," said Toby. "Thank you." Basil hurried away to meet the Fat Controller at the big station. Terence was impressed. "I've never seen an engine like him before," he said. "None of us did when Basil first arrived," said Toby, "but he's proved to be quite a good ally for the railway. Until we get our new coal, he'll definitely help us out of this situation." And Toby was right. Basil worked his magic for the other engines. Whatever he tackled, whether it be coaches or trucks, Basil handled it with great ease, and the engines were grateful for his help. A few days later, Basil arrived at the washdown near Knapford Sheds and found Thomas complaining. He was red in the face and cross. "That's the last time I take Annie and Clarabelle with this rubbish burning in my firebox," he grumbled. "Still got coal troubles then?" asked Basil. "You have no idea," grumbled Thomas. "I'm surprised Gordon's lasted this long. He's taking the express today. I hope he manages." Basil completely understood. "I must ask, Basil," said Thomas, "don't you have this trouble on the other railway?" "Well, I'm not really a steam engine," began Basil. I understand that," said Thomas. "I meant, do you have bad cases of fuel now and then?" "Sometimes I get the occasional contaminated kerosene," Basil confessed, "but other than that, it's not too much trouble." "I can imagine," said Thomas. "I just wish this new coal would hurry up. I'm tired of using this horrible stuff." Basil was in agreement. At first, Gordon performed well that morning as he left from the big station with the express. However, despite a good run to start with, just as he left Tidmouth Tunnel, the dark clouds of black smoke began to appear, billowing out of his funnel. Gordon tried his best, but to no avail. "I must stop," he wheezed. Luckily, there was a signal box with an emergency siding up ahead. Gordon reached the box and with enough puff was able to slink onto the siding out of the way. The passengers were anxious. Gordon's fireman went to the signal box and asked the signalman if he could borrow the telephone to call for help. He came back a few minutes later with a positive look on his face. "The Fat Controller's been made aware of the situation," he said. "He sent an engine to collect the express." "Oh, that's a relief," said Gordon, who by this point had finally caught his breath. Before long, Gordon heard the loud but familiar honk of a horn in the distance. He was overjoyed when Basil arrived. "Well, Gordon," he said, I helped you with the trials of the Express, but I didn't think I'd be helping you this soon." "Basil, my dear engine, you are a lifesaver," cried Gordon. "Thank goodness you've come. The passengers need to get to the other end of the line." "Count on me, Gordon," promised Basil. "I'll get them there." Basil was soon coupled up to the train. As he waited for the guard to blow his whistle, he told Gordon that Salty had been called up the line to take him to the works. "Thank you," said Gordon. Basil smiled. As the guard blew his whistle, he thundered away. Gordon watched until he was out of sight. "A majestic engine if I ever saw one," he said grandly. A week later, Gordon returned from the works. But in the time that he had been away, there had been no sign of Basil. As Thomas and Duck were welcoming Gordon home, they all heard a familiar horn in the distance. "I wondered where he got to," chuckled Duck. But the engines were in for a surprise. As Basil backed into the sheds, he was no longer painted in the brown livery of the English Electric Company. He was now wearing the modern British Railways blue with yellow trimming. "My dear Basil," exclaimed Gordon, "what a fetching colour to see you in." Basil smiled. At that moment the Fat Controller arrived. "Ah, Basil," he said, "good to see you back." "Thank you, sir," said Basil happily. "Excuse me, sir," said Thomas. "Why is Basil in a different colour?" "This is a personal thank you from me," said the Fat Controller. "I have given Basil this new coat of paint for all the hard work he's done for my railway." "It gets better," chimed in Basil. "I've also made a delivery too." "A delivery?" said Duck. "I have sent away all the bad coal you were struggling with," said the Fat Controller, and Basil kindly offered to collect the trucks full of fresh, clean coal and bring them here. "Oh, sir," said Gordon. "Well done, Basil," said Thomas. "A credit to us through and through," said Duck. Basil was grateful. "It's the least I can do," he said. "Basil," said the Fat Controller, "you might not be one of my engines, but you will always have a place here whenever you come to see us." Basil felt very happy. And the Fat Controller was right. Basil stayed on Sodor for a little while before he was due to return home. But between you and me, I think Basil will be back again. Don't you?